Morena everybody, we are all here, so we will begin, and if I welcome you all, and also those of the public who are here today. Nice to see some interest in our council meeting, and please just a reminder about our cell phones, and turn them off, and we'll take a break during the proceedings if you need to clear your urgent messages. So I'll ask Councillor Maxwell, would you please open our meeting with a karakia?
Thank you, Te Manakura. And because we are the first bilingual city in New Zealand, I'll do it in Māori and English. Karakia mo te konehera. E te atua kaharawa, ko koe te tohu rangatira, te tohu mātauranga. Manakitia mai mātou o pōnanga i tēnei rā, e mahi nei o mātou mahi o te painga o ngā tāngata o te konehera o Rotorua. Tukua mai kia tau te rangi Mārie ki runga i a mātou i ngā wā katoa. Ko iu kraiti hoki tō mātou ariki. Amen. Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge, send thy blessing upon us, your servants, this day, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of the Rotorua district. May we be tolerant in ourselves at all times, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, thank you. I now call for any apologies, and if I please note that Councillor Kumar and Councillor Tapsell have both sent apologies. Moved. Second, Councillor Gould. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Bentley? No? Urgent items not on the agenda? Councillor Bentley and then Councillor Sturt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. During the last meeting that we had in this chamber, there was accusations made against myself with regard to comments that the chair at the time made, Councillor Sturt, when following a brief trip to the toilet and then subsequently coming back and listening to a presentation by Mr. Michael, I opened an app on my phone, which in these modern phones now they have things like calculators and so forth. Did a calculation. Councillor, the Chair Sturt at the time stopped the meeting and accused me of rushing out to text my mates. How he arrived at that conclusion, I have no idea. And then further accused me of texting during the meeting. And I would request now an apology and a withdrawal from those statements, and ask guidance from the Mayor to do so.
It's not really an urgent item, but it is a matter you want addressed. I think I'll just say that as the code of conduct that we all agreed to, that's what we all must comply with. If there was an error, I'd put it to Councillor Sturt. Are you happy to? We've had that explanation that there was no texting. Are you happy to accept that, Councillor Sturt?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to accept the explanation. However, I will not be apologising because I think Councillor Bentley owes me an apology and my family, and I will not be apologising or withdrawing my comments.
I think that's very good that you've had an acceptance of your explanation. Thank you for that, Councillor Bentley, and I leave it for two grown people to sort through the other difference. Councillor Sturt. Can you put your mic on?
I'll start again. I'd like to table the review of the New Zealand racing industry, a report requested by the Right Honourable Winston Peters, compiled by John Massara, AM from Australia. It's an 87-page document which does include, Madam Chair, implications for the Rotorua Racing Club.
Did you say it doesn't?
It does.
It does.
It suggests that the Rotorua Racing Club over the next 5 years will close. I think the economic implications for this community with people who work at the racing club, trainers and people associated with the racing industry, the implications of that are profound. And also you're aware that the Rotorua Park Racing Club is partly owned by council and as part of the Ngāti Whakaue Gifted Reserves Protocol, and also the Rotorua Racing Club own considerable swathes of land. I table it, Madam Chair, because I think it behoves us from an executive point of view to have a look at the report and spot the implications, because we've got till the 19th of October to make a submission. I would like our submission to get alongside the stakeholders, which include Te Arawa, Malcolm Short, the Rotorua Racing Club Executive and President, and also I'm happy to have some input, because I think if the Rotorua Park Racecourse closes, it's going to leave a huge dent in our entertainment and events from a sport and recreation point of view calendar, because at Christmas over 5,000 people attend that race meeting at Christmas between Boxing Day and the New Year. So I table it, Madam Chair, in good faith. And can I ask that the executive make comment, because I think we do need, because if there were no implications for Rotorua, I wouldn't be tabling it, but there is.
It is an issue that seems to be of high interest in the community, and actually unbeknown to you, because of the impact on the community, I've written a letter of support as the Mayor to the Rotorua Racing Club. If Council wishes to have a bigger discussion about this, I would suggest that goes to an Operations and Monitoring Committee. We haven't had that discussion, but support in principle was the tenor of my letter, that we would certainly support the club and their future operations.
We can bring that.
Could you bring that? Yes. So CEO has said that they can bring that to the next Operations and Monitoring meeting.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a point of clarification in terms of that Masara report, by my understanding, doesn't actually recommend that any club will close. It says courses should close, not clubs. And I think that point needs to be made clear.
So we'll have that good discussion, not here, we'll accept it and note that I have responded to the Racing Club, and that will bring a report to the
Madam
next
Chair,
operation.
just to clarify, I totally agree with Councillor Ken, but the implications for the Taranui Jockey Club, Rotorua Bay of Plenty Hunt Club and the Rotorua Racing Club, if the course closes, they're going to have to relocate, and so the implications, that's what I want us to
That's what we can
discuss.
clarify at the
Yep.
O&M meeting.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rob.
Are there any other urgent items not on the agenda? Thank you. Then we move now to the confirmation of the council minutes on the 30th of August to be confirmed as a true and accurate record. Moved Councillor Gould, seconded Councillor Rokawa-Tate. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. And now, thank you, we've got Mark Gibb here, the CEO of Rotorua Airport Limited, who's going to give us an update and a presentation. Thank you for coming, Mark. This has become quite a high interest also in our community, so nice to know what's going on.
Kia ora everyone, and thank you very much for having me here today. It's taken a wee bit of time to get here and be in a position to address the SPNF resolution. I'm hoping to be seen as a wee bit of a swan, I suppose. We've been gracefully cruising along the top of the lake for the last 6 months, but our feet have been rigorously working away below the surface on this project and a number of others. What I'd like to do is really specifically address the resolution. I haven't expanded the presentation at all to cover off design, the program, or anything else pertaining to the project. But I'm very happy to address any questions at the end of it. So just to dial the clock back a wee bit, on the 26th of April, there was an SPNF resolution at the airport board prior to committing to redevelopment of the airport, report to council a budget for finalised plans and that included costs pertaining to aviation security areas. As a point of clarification, the aviation security areas, we've had a very strong signal from government, CEA and aviation security that screening potentially will be brought in through domestic airports, through twin prop operations. And we're wanting to ensure when we step into redevelopment of the terminal that the scanning, provisioning for scanning is built in as part of that process.
Mark, could you just say when is that may happen?
Mia, we haven't had a specific update in terms of when that's likely to happen. What we are on notice on is we'd be given circa 2 to 3 weeks notice to bring in scanning provisioning. So it will happen very quickly. We've received a full operational summary from aviation security in terms of how they will look to deploy at Rotorua, resource and all their infrastructural requirements, which we have built into the plans.
I'll leave it till the end of your presentation, but I'm sure there'll be more questions on that.
So I suppose just to step through into the detail now. So the actual headline budget for the overall project is $4.4 million. That includes the aviation security areas. We have a significant upgrade in terms of the security camera network over the airport. And a number of mechanical services upgrades pertaining to air conditioning. The second point is we've also allowed, given the original budget was set in November 2016, we've allowed and covered any movements in the construction cost indice to assure we've accounted for those when we move to tender the work. In line with the expenditure of $4.4 million, it's not all one-way traffic from our perspective. There's an ability, and we've agreed this with Air New Zealand through a structured arrangement around landing fees and capital costs, that we can look to reset our landing charges and our terminal service charges. So there's potentially an ability to generate some level of return off the capital works investment. Off the back of that also, there's a significant upside for us in terms of resetting the leases within the terminal, advertising concessions and a range of other income generating opportunities that we will look to bring forward. So as well as the cost, there will be significant uplift in revenue. The overall terminal works comprise part of a $7.5 million capital spend for the airport for the ensuing 3 years. So again, there may have been a degree of confusion at the April meeting around the fact that the terminal was costing $7.5 million. I can categorically tell you, no, it's not costing $7.5 million. The overall works budget is $4.4, including a significant contingency allowance. Outside of that, and this detail has been presented to Council through our SOI. We have a number of other investments that we will be addressing over the course of the ensuing 3 years. In the main pertaining to maintenance and upkeep of the runway surface and the replacement of one of the airport fire tenders, which is as a result of the existing vehicles coming to the end of their economic and usable lives. So in terms of how specifically we will fund the work, there's 3 elements. We have cash in the bank at the present time of $2.1 million. Now that cash in the bank comes from a couple of surplus, or two key areas, I suppose. Firstly, off the back of the airport's operational activities, and the other significant contributor is through the payment by council to RAL of depreciation payments in accordance with the service funding agreement. The second item is, again, is cash flows from our operational activities. So if I look out over about a 5-year horizon going forward, it will generate surpluses of around $3.2 million that will be applied back into the capital program. And the last is around what we call the CARL or BNZ overdraft facility that sits at $4.4 million. We will dig into that to the tune of $2.2 million at peak cash flow at 2019. Now again, there's a significant amount of detail that sits in behind this. We run a fairly sophisticated cash flow model given the nature of the business being an infrastructural business. that looks at a 3-year window, a 10 and 20-year window. As I suppose, a bit of a segue to this, for your interest in terms of debt repayment, again, this is not all one-way traffic. So whilst we have an extensive capital program that we'll be addressing over the ensuing 3 years, by 2024, we will take our current debt limit from $15 million down to $5.9 million with full repayment of the CAL facility. Now, the only item I would caveat on that is we're embarking on a conversation with Council Executive in the present time in relation to the master plan, and that conversation will unfold over the ensuing 3 to 4 months, which potentially may impact on the debt payment profile into the future. So in terms of the next steps, for those that have been out to the airport in recent times, you would have seen we commenced construction of the Emergency Operations Centre back in April. As at today, we declare practical completion on that building and will apply to Council for co-compliance consent. The contractor, Mara, that has delivered that project for us, we're looking to move into the terminal works. So we're looking to effectively facilitate a fairly seamless transition for Mara from the EOC into the terminal. Over the ensuing month, we will conclude preliminary design. We will look to move into contract for the works and then look to activate pre-Christmas. Now, in terms of how that's likely to unfold, the first area that we will address will be the old International Arrivals Hall. So again, just to sort of review on where we'd got to last time, the centre structure in the building will be demolished. That's the old 1963 portion. Yeah. The arrivals function into the future will be facilitated out of the old international area. We future-proof that to still facilitate private charters or international flights that can all be done in there. And again, there's an extensive refurbishment of the existing departures lounge. So there's not a significant rebuild as such. It's really using the existing assets far more smartly and sweating those a bit harder. The only new build will relate to a link walkway that hooks the two buildings together and an airside canopy. For those that have an interest, and I know there's several around the table that do in terms of the Air New Zealand Lounge, again, we're in the final throes of a conversation with Air New Zealand around that. Our position, as stated to Air New Zealand, is if they do choose not to move ahead with that, is we will look to build a business case and to fund that separately. The cost for that lounge sits outside the budget that I've presented today, but from the board's perspective, that's very much an internal rate of return type play, i.e. if we can get an acceptable commercial return over the cost of capital, we will move with it. If it doesn't stand on its own 2 legs commercially, we simply won't. So I've been asked by the board to put a fair degree of rigour into bringing this opportunity together pre-Christmas. So that is effectively the basis of the presentation, but it's fairly short and succinct, but I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Right. Councillor Kent first.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for your presentation. This comes back to the point that I raised originally. When the topic of the airport development, redevelopment came up, it was stated at that time that there would be no increase in borrowing. Now, we've just heard that, in fact, debt will increase by $2 million as a consequence of going ahead with the $4 million project, which has not gone out to public consultation. I believe that under the rules of this council, a $4 million project that is going to incur $2 million worth of debt should go out to public consultation before that money is committed to.
I think we'll get an answer here from our Chief Financial Officer. That's not quite what I heard, Thomas.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Councillor Kent. I think the key is understanding how the council actually funds the airport and making sure that you're comfortable that the transactions and activity that Mark has described is actually already transparent. Well, it is included in our LTP. So council has a service funding level agreement with the airport. It is based on a 20-year forecast that was agreed at the previous LTP. That 20-year forecast set out the assets renewals, agreed renewal of its assets, and as well as recognising that work needed to take place on earthquake strengthening and those sorts of elements to those buildings. And Council therefore entered into that funding agreement to provide certainty to the airport on the funding to allow it to do that. In doing so, it recognises that there will be peaks and troughs with regards to the funding. There will be times where there is cash surpluses and there will be time whereby they may have to temporarily borrow. But the key is, over the next 10-year window, the strategy is to reduce its debt back to what Mark indicated before.
15 to 5. Yeah. That, Mark, could you reiterate? I heard you say that that debt in effect reduces from 15 to 5.
Yes, that's correct. And I just reinforce the fact that running an airport is not a linear exercise. You know, we have a $35 million runway, we have a $45 million asset transfer. The nature of the business is lumpy. Okay, in 1 year we may have no capital program. At the present time, the $7.5 million is essential to keep the airport open. We don't spend the money, we close the airport. Simple as that. Okay, I can't be any clearer now. In terms of the debt profile, by 2024, the existing debt of $15 million gets paid down to $5.9 million. The CAL is fully repaid.
Thank you. Is it a supplementary on that, Councillor Kent?
Yes, Your Worship. The question I've raised hasn't been answered. The question I've raised is a $4 million upgrade to the airport is an expenditure that should go out to public consultation. It has not. That is the issue.
Thomas, could you answer that in terms of the CCO structure?
Yep. So ultimately, it is reflected in our long-term plan, and it is reflected in the agreed funding that we provide to allow the airport to renew its assets. So ultimately, that's what it comes down to, as well as on an annual basis, the airport does provide a statement of intent with regards to that council can provide feedback on, and the airport has been very transparent on this over the last couple of years with regards to what it was doing. And from a council perspective, we had to make sure that we reflected that in our long-term planning and our annual planning, which is done. I think one of the questions that you raised, though, is around the debt. I think there has to be some acceptance that the airport has a debt profile and it is sticking to that debt profile. And while they may have to temporarily lift its debt, if we look back over the last couple of years, they've also held less debt than what was forecast as well. And so rather than leaving their debt where it was and holding on to more cash to facilitate what they're doing, they've obviously chosen to temporarily reduce their debt now to facilitate the development and still stick with the debt repayment profile as per the 20-year forecast that underpins everything.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
Madam Chair, thank you, Mark, for the report. I noticed your report says 30th of June 2021, which means 3.5 years. The 7.5, which you mentioned on one side, commitment, and on the other screen it shows 2.1, 2.2, 2.576 million, and the difference is 612,400. Is that included in the 7.5 or the 2.1, 2.2, 2.576? Is that included in the 7.5 or is that separate? And the difference between the two sets of figures is $612,400.
Yeah, Councillor, sorry, could you refer me to the slide you're specifically addressing? I'm happy to give a breakdown of the capital spend. I'm just not clear in relation to the composition of these other numbers.
Councillor, or what you're referring to, Could you table the document that you're talking to? It's just that we're not on your page, that's all I'm saying.
With the slides came up on the screen before, one of them mentioned $7.5 million commitment to 30th of June 2021.
Yeah, that's the capital program, correct, yes. So
is that separate to the next slide, which mentioned 2.1, 2.2 and 2.576?
There was a slide that had projected cash in the bank of 2.1. There was cash flows from operations, which was a second item that I think you're talking about. The 2.576 was FY19 only. If I looked at the surpluses will run over the period of the 3 years, in fact they are 3.2 million. So that potentially I think addresses the point you're making around the $600,000 difference between the 2.57 versus the 3.2. What I can assure you of is our operating revenues will cover the cost of the project and enable us to repay debt to 5.9 million by 2024.
So that's the banner we need to have
Correct.
stuck in our head. Councillor Sturt.
We missed you at the O&M meeting, but we're delighted with the report today. Just a couple of questions. The earthquake strengthening regime that all new builds are required, is that included in your CapEx at 7.5 in the new developments, and what are you doing about the old developments with earthquake strengthening? And the second question was, I think it's for Thomas really, and follows on from Councillor Kent's question. I just want to have it clear in my mind that the 7.5 CapEx spend and the debt profile up to 2021 is implied and included in the LTP, because we signed off to a statement of corporate intent with that in it, did we not? So I'd ask that of Thomas, if you could answer the first one. Thanks.
Look, absolutely. Just in terms of, I suppose, the seismic element, and I just need to take a couple of steps back on this. So the primary driver for this work is addressing seismic issues. Okay, so there have been, over the last year, there's been a number of inferences to the fact that this is discretionary. I can assure you it's not discretionary, it's essential. And the reason I say that is the original part of the building was built in 1963. It was altered in 1973, it was altered in 1990, it was altered in 2006. As it sits at the moment today, the building is classified earthquake risk. Okay, we need to simply address it. The same profiling applies to the existing departures area. We have a building, whilst it was built in 2002, is classified as earthquake risk. So the primary driver around the project is one of health and safety and public wellbeing, to ensure that as an airport, as a company, we provide safe facilities to move people back and forth. And that's 250,000 people a year, basically. Okay, now the other side of this is given the age of the assets, we have deteriorating systems. The air conditioning system is at the end of its economic life, the fire systems are at the end of their economic life, the roof is rusting and leaking. So we are sort of compelled, as part of the seismic program, to also address the broader update of the buildings. Okay, so all this is getting folded into it. We have an incredibly rigorous statutory regime in which we run an airport, and as part of that we have a number of regulatory authorities that dictate what we do. So again, we need to ensure that the facilities from a security perspective, again, enable us to maintain our operation certificate to operate as an airport. Okay, so there's the essential need. Off the back of that, we have a number of businesses in the terminal that simply have outgrown. Okay, at peak at the moment, and I'll give you an example. From 6:45, 7:15, we run 3 start-up flights to Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland. That at peak is 212 people, 216 people in the terminal, plus meters and greeters. We've simply outgrown the facilities. Food and beverage have not been addressed for 10 years, they're substandard. The rental car companies have outgrown. So there's a number of issues. And the third issue, which is the soft one, is Manaakitanga. Okay, now we, as an airport, take a huge amount of pride in how we welcome people. And I'm embarrassed in relation to the way that we present Rotorua through the airport. So again, there's a big opportunity to address the whole Manaakitanga issue and ensure that we deliver to our people, to our whānau, to tourists, the correct level of hospitality that's appropriate if we want to be a world-class destination. As a final comment, there's $100 million of investment going into domestic and regional airports as we sit today. Auckland Airport spending $1 million a day on redevelopment. Wellington Airport is spending $650,000 a day in redevelopment. Those numbers are unbelievable. We can't sit here and take for granted that people will continue to come into Rotorua Airport. Tauranga is spending $13 million, New Plymouth spending money, etc. We compete with these airports day in, day out. So again, tucked in behind the essential need, the commercial needs, the manakitanga, is the fact that we need to stay competitive. And for $4.4 million, we're getting a lot of bang for our buck.
And Mark, I'll just comment at the New Zealand Tourism Awards, Christchurch Airport won a major award, and really the airport is, you know, for the premier destination for tourism in the North Island. Our airport is an embarrassment, so I'm awfully glad we're investing in it. Councillor Rotorua. Oh, sorry, Thomas.
And Councillor Sturt, yes, I can give assurance that the funding provided in the LTP is what is helping to facilitate this, and that the two are aligned, and that they are on the path to meet the debt reduction target in the LTP as well. Yep.
Councillor Rotorua.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as a frequent flyer, our airport has been tired for many years, but it's just around the VIP lounge, Mark, if you don't mind me asking, because I use Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. So that's, you're really proposing, if it's going to be a flyer anyway, at some stage in terms of paying its way, that's obviously really going to be for our visitors to the airport rather than domestic, because I would really use it. I just get there in time to jump on the flight and get back and then want to get home. So who is it really designed for?
Well, if I looked at, every month we aggregate customer feedback. Around 50% of that customer feedback relates to the absence of a lounge. So a lot of this, from a New Zealand customer perspective, people pay their Corrie membership. You have lounges all over the place other than Rotorua and Blenheim as the 13th and 14th largest airports in the country. So Air New Zealand have an issue to address with their customers that is front and centre for them at the moment. We have a number of people that come to the airport, either through alliances with Air New Zealand or as Air New Zealand customers or tourists that require a lounge. Okay, we believe if Air New Zealand don't do it, that there's a commercial model that we can bring into place with sponsorship, with with utilisation of existing F&B facilities when we reset those, that will provide a viable option for people other than sitting in the main terminal.
I think for the last 40 years we've got rather used to the friendliness of sitting around having business meetings while we have a cup of coffee, but I accept your view. We get it. I get that all the time about where do I go and do business while I'm waiting to fly. We like it because we all meet, but I think there's wider community, business community on the road, on the air waves that are expecting that now. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mark, for the presentation and succinctly outlining the compelling reasons for this redevelopment. We only have to look at the Ride the Runway, which is happening next month as part of the Bike Festival, just at the level of community love and interest in the airport. With trends being here in May next year, it's exciting to see we're on track to have this redevelopment ready for that important influx of world trade, tourist trade people. Just my only question is, I understand now with the completion of the EOC that the admin part of the business will move to that building as well. But what will be the expected disruption for travellers while this redevelopment takes place?
Yes, so Councillor Howell will address that as the first stage of it will be demolition of the interior of the existing International Arrivals Hall. That will be rebuilt, so as part of that the key elements are a series of new booths for the rental car companies, together with the provision of extra facilities for a couple of operators that wish to come into the airport. As part of that, we're looking to move aside a paper-orientated information and advertising regime that's deployed and go fully digital. And there's a number of really exciting initiatives we're working with. We hope to work with Broader Te Arawa, Ngāti Kuko Pako, and a number of other stakeholders around the opportunities there, which is really exciting because for me that will deliver the point of uniqueness for the terminal. That element will be done, bought online. As soon as that's done, we demolish the existing centrepiece of the building, and I don't believe that would take a lot of effort to complete. And then from there, once that's done, we move into stripping out the existing departures hall. Whilst that's happening, the departures function will occur down as part of the old international area, which we can pull it off, so there'll be some manipulation in terms of how we park aircraft on the gates. So in behind this, we've got a very detailed methodology that we've agreed with Air New Zealand, with Civil Aviation, with Airways, around how we facilitate operational continuity in what could be quite a disruptive period for us.
Councillor Hunt.
Comment first, and then I have a question. I think our community needs to remember that this is a perfect opportunity for us. We have to do the earthquake strengthening, and we are going to be forced to put in security. If we'd done all this work and then we're forced to spend all this money, the cost would ratchet up. So this is an ideal opportunity for us. And I think regarding the lounge, we have to remember that we have a lot of international tourists. We have a lot of locals who fly internationally, the Rotorua, Auckland out, and you've got to be there at least an hour before. If you get fog bound, if you get caught up, if someone has to drop you for an hour or 2 hours before, this is your opportunity to do your work or to rest and have some relaxation. So it is vital. It is sorely missed, as is evidenced by half the suggestions asking for one. My question is, Mark, what will be your expected capacity once you have completed that? You've said you're squeezed when you've got 200 plus for your morning flights, including the lounge.
Yep, so we've, the development as such has been built on projections that sort of sit between sensitivity looks 10 to 15 years out in terms of managing growth. So that's number one issue. The second issue we've looked to bring into the design is how the future looks for the terminal should we need to grow. So within the actual document set for the plans, we've scribed out expansionary areas for domestic and potentially for international should they come back into play. So not only will this deal with capacity requirements for the next 10 to 15 years, we also have a clear view in terms of how we would extend and expand the terminal out beyond that should the opportunity arise. So at the moment, that's looking around a growth rate of 4 to 5%, and by the time you compound 4 to 5% over 10 years, it's a 50% uplift, you know, in passengers. So we go from, 250 to 375,000 people, so it can come at you quite quickly. The lesson we've learned and we're incredibly conscious of, and a great example is Auckland Airport at the moment, around how they took the foot off the accelerator in terms of providing facilities. They're under all sorts of pressure domestically and internationally up there at the moment because they simply can't keep pace with growth. From our perspective, there's a great opportunity to keep cadence with the growth we're seeing through the airport as a result of this project. So again, there's another dimension that comes into it other than the essential need, the commercial need, the manaakitanga elements.
Mark?
One further comment, Madam Chair. I think anyone who travels through any airports, there's enormous infrastructure work going on. So the interruption and the disruption is actually global. Yes. So while it's mildly irritating for some when they do travel, it's pretty common. And certainly Auckland Airport has been roasted in the media about their lack of investment. And I would hate that to be our story because we didn't see the future coming, and that's what we're trying to do.
Mark, I just have a question about the civil aviation costs, because I remember when it was taken out, when the Trans-Tasman stopped, taken out, now has to come back in. Does the Civil Aviation Authority pay for that investment to reintroduce screening?
Yes, so just for clarification, so the Aviation Security Service sit under the wing of Civil Aviation as part of that. They don't physically lease the areas in which the scanners will go. So we're looking at two scanning areas. Firstly will be the scanning of passengers going from what we call landside into an airside sterile lounge. And the other is the provision of screening of baggage. So all baggage as well as people will be screened as part of this process. They don't specifically pay for that. That charge ultimately gets dialed back through a capital recovery calculation back to the airlines and ultimately to the customer. So we're very conscious in terms of how Rotorua pegs against the balance of domestic airports within New Zealand and Australia. And we're about to embark on a conversation with Air New Zealand around the future outlook for charges relative to getting a capital return on part of this work. So that's, that's number one. The second item is there are elements when aviation security come in, and they do bring a very large group of people in to run it, that we will lease to them. So we build specific lunchrooms, offices and other areas that we would lease to them as we would any of the other companies that are leasing space for us.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the update and the report, and it is really exciting for us, especially with the future direction. Thank you. Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Thomas. Now we move to the report back on the meeting in Southeast Asia, Latin America. It's in your papers, my report. I really don't need to speak to it other than the incredible uptake of cultural tourism. That was what it was all about. And it was the embedded video of Tupuia that actually suddenly all of the Latin countries got what cultural tourism is all about, and they all cheered. So it was wonderful to have that, because while I was talking, you actually wondered if people were really understanding what we were talking about. When we showed the video, there was just an amazing response. And can I just point out that the items in the conclusion are all being dealt with through the relative ministers. I'll move that my report be accepted. Could you turn your mic on, Trevor?
The bullet points on page 16, and yeah, you urged them to write to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and but we could hold it here in Rotorua, but a very thorough report, and I like even the attachments of what can be presented and changed around to suit different presentations that could be done. Very good report. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Oh, thank you. Councillor Rokoto.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the very good report. I just wanted to ask you, you travelled on your own, obviously, and you travelled, who provided the funding there? The ambassador from Wellington, yes, and that was very great. Can I just ask a question? Do you feel that, because we have Trevor here as our cultural advisor, etc., in terms of ambassador, sorry, do you feel you're disadvantaged when you go, particularly for this one, where it's cultural cities, do you feel you might have been disadvantaged without having our ambassador with you?
I think it's a very good question.
Thank you.
We tried to negotiate. It was actually all costs were covered by Argentina, and the air costs were sponsored by Air New Zealand, but they would not pay for anybody else, so no accompanying person. We challenged that, did point out that we have a cultural ambassador, and it would have been appropriate, but I think Argentina decided to keep the costs down. They'd only pay for one. But I think we've cut through that now for them to see that actually you can't go one without the other. And I did notice, if you look at those, the 36 countries that attended, they seemed to have an army of staff. So I had nobody, and I had to write the report. I had to make sure included in the report was that we had no authority. So I had no secretariat, but luckily I understood what was being requested of us and how to manage it through the contact of the Argentine embassy in Buenos Aires. So I was in constant phone conversation with them. I think in future for Rotorua, when we are going, especially on cultural tourism requests, because this is growing, and it's definitely growing in the Latin American countries, who are now actually the people that tell the greatest story, dare I say it, are the All Blacks. It was All Blacks first, Tupuia second, and then looking at the tourism city of New Zealand that is seen as the cultural heart of tourism, Rotorua, we should take our cultural ambassador. That's definitely, I was lacking that beside me. One of the profile people in the embassy, though, could fill that gap too. Tani Wheatford, who works for the Argentine ambassador, he comes from the Mount. So if I'd have known that, I'd have said to the ambassador, get Tani out with me, so that I had that beside me. But yes, you learn. This is the first time, actually, any mayor of any city in New Zealand or Australia, there was no Australian invitation, has been invited. So we're now seeing, it's only the cultural strand of Fairlac that is strong. And that is our strength in building on from the Economic Indigenous Forum that's here this October, next month. We're going to get many requests about the Rotorua Way and the cultural dimension. Thank you for raising that. All right. Do you want a break before we get into reports from other committees? Do you want a 5-minute break so that you can look at your emails and do your stuff? We'll have a 5-minute break. is how there is scrutiny of the detail that actually we as a committee of a whole just have probably never done to this degree. So, Kate, you are presenting, and I think you're being supported, aren't you, by Karen and Councillor Kent, Councillor Hunt and Councillor Kent? I don't know how you're doing this.
Either Kate can go through it, or I'm happy to talk through it. Kate, yeah.
We should get the...
Okay.
Yes.
Staff talk, yep.
Okay, so, and apologies for missing the beginning of the presentation. The plan change was very much just a tidy up coming out of the review of the district plan. It covered off a large number of topics, and we won't go through those in any detail. But the first page, the next page of the presentation looks at the key points that we ran through. The main issues we covered were apartments and making sure that there's good provisions around apartments. Can we jump on to the next page of the presentation? Oh, my brain's not there, I'm sorry, I've just got the cold. So overall, the intent of the plan change was not to change the intent of the district plan at all. It's not a change of direction, and it's very common past, once you've had a district plan review, to do a tidy up.
Kate, can you just explain the Section 32 component of this?
Yes.
Is that a driver, or where does that fit? Just for council's edification?
Whenever you do a plan change, you've got to do a Section 32 report, which is an evaluation of what the changes are. So it's just making sure that you've really considered what you've done, and that's half the reason why this document's so big. The Section 32 was done when it was notified back in October or November of 2016. So, leading on from the airport just being here before, we tidied up some of the provisions around the exterior of the airport, the air noise area, just to make it practical for both the airport in terms of reverse sensitivity and giving them protection, and also for residents, making sure that they can do basic alterations to their dwellings. Looked at apartments within the city centre, again just making sure provisions were workable. In the residential and rural zones, there were changes for minor household units. Again, it was just clarification. It was unclear within the rural zone whether you could have one or two subsidiary dwellings as a permitted activity. So this is all kind of detail, but it's detail that is important when you get to a resource consent. And wording, again, clearing things up. Minimum lot size in the rural 2 zone. There were inconsistent references in the document to net and gross site area, which made things confusing. This was an interesting one. Throughout the whole district plan change, the district plan review, the zoning of the area in green in the middle of the document, and here accidentally changed from residential. It had been residential since at least 1985, and so it got changed to rural. We can't see any reason why, so it was again a tidy up, returning it back to residential. In the last few ones, there was a total of 38 topics that we changed. And so heritage buildings, there was an incorrect mapping reference, earthquake fault traces, it wasn't applied to certain rural zones. So that was the crux of the plan change.
Right, and Kate, just also could we welcome you, I'm sorry I overlooked it, but Kim beside you.
Yes.
So Kim Smith, this isn't Kim's baptism by fire at all. Kim came with us out to Rangawiwahi the other day and talked about significant natural areas, and that was a great welcome to Rotorua for you, Kim. So nice to see you at the table. But councillors often don't know who you are. Yeah. Okay, is there any additional comment from either Councillor Hunt and Kent?
Happy to answer any questions if anyone has one. Councillor Kent and I were reflecting that of all the plan changes we've done, this one started the first, and it has taken a very long time because these are quite minor changes in some respects, except they have quite major implications. So it's a sort of a dichotomy of them being small but actually quite significant, and are certainly it's been a good process to get to this point.
So how many hours do you think it's taken? I think that's interesting for us because it comes as a given, But how many hours work?
It's a tough one, in fact. Again, Councillor Kent and I were reflecting on the fact that because it's not one topic, it's hard to keep it in your head.
Yes.
So it's a long time between October 16, when it first went out, to when it came back now, and to refresh ourselves. So it's like seeing it anew. So quite a few hours actually went into discussing this, and again with Gina Mohi from Te Tato, who's the other member of our committee.
Councillor Kent?
And in fact, some topics even took about an hour of discussion to decide.
Yeah.
Because of the ramifications. I'll give you just one simple example. We were debating what should happen in the CBD in terms of provision of storage space. And the intention was that you had to have storage space on the ground floor level. Well, the issue was raised, well, hang on, isn't it achieving just the same if you can access it via a lift? But the intended plan change hadn't allowed for that. So debates on that sort of issue went on for sometimes a quarter of an hour, half an hour, just over one single topic. And you've seen how many pages there are.
But the district plan itself, would you like to remind us how long it took council to get the district plan operative?
For that, well, 10 years, but the
Yes.
actual hearing was 7 months of 3 weeks a month, 4 days a week for the councillors on that panel, and Rick. Yeah. So he'll be well aware. Those who have actually read the submissions will be well aware that we got 17. Invariably, just about every issue had someone in support and someone opposing.
Yeah.
So there, it requires the committee to take a district-wide view of the issues and to make a decision that, while it's obviously not going to please everyone, is, we feel, within the best interest. It now will go out for opportunities for appeals. So if there are any things that we've particularly missed, then they will be appealed against, and that is the proper process. And then whatever happens after that is either conversations and mitigations for that, and we hope there aren't any, but that's up to the community to see what work we've done.
Right, questions, Councillor Sturt and then Councillor
I've got a question and also an amendment to the motion. And number 5, if we could just note our vote of thanks to Councillors Hunt, Councillor Kent and Mrs Mohi for the work that they have done over the preceding 2 years.
So that's an addition, point
That's
5.
number 5,
yes.
if I could. If the mover and seconder are happy with that.
Yes.
The other question I've got is, of the 17 submitters, you guys are the expertise. I was not going to read every detail because you've obviously built up a bank of expertise and knowledge in this area, and woe be it for me, who hasn't heard these submissions or the direction that was taken as a result of the submissions, to make comment on it. But we all did get communication from one person with regard to Lake Karaka. Is that this part of it? No. Okay, right. Okay, so on page 27, if any of those 17 people are feeling aggrieved, there is, and I think that needs to be highlighted, should the council approve the plan change today, next steps involve notifying council's decision. We do that through the media, and the submitters have the ability to appeal any decision, and if there are appeals, a limited range of other parties can join the appeal. But one of the things in reading the background on page 28, this now opens up the areas that were previously, there was some ambiguity in terms of what you could do or what you couldn't do in those particular areas. And I'm delighted that the change in Florrie Heights, Tehi Road and Gallagher Street has been made, because that has held up development and proposals for development. So I'm delighted with it, and I hope my colleagues support my amendment to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. 2 quick, easy questions. One is, the first question, is it correct the appeals can only come from the people, the 17 can only come from within them? All right. The other one is, reading through it, and just around the air noise area and aircraft noise area, can I ask, I don't see anything in here from the local schools that surround that area. Can I take it they're happy? And they're, like, I think I recall where they had to have double glazing and various things. I take it that those things have been done. There's Rua Mata School, Rotorua School, and everything there.
The double glazing, I assume, occurred when the plan was reviewed in 2006 or thereabouts with the airport plan change, and I think that was part of that. The changes to the air noise area, so you've got the airport itself, then you've got the air noise area, then the inner noise area, then the outer noise area. I don't know if any of the schools are within the inner. I assume they're not. It's quite a confined space, just in a funny shape like this around.
They are affected.
They are within the inner.
The
within
second one, I think.
Oh, if they're.
If I could, Councillor Maxwell, essentially the issues that were raised here were there are a very few properties within the inner noise area that were prohibited from doing anything. Now, they wished to do minor renovations, and so we've gone from prohibited, which means don't even come and ask us, to non-complying. Now, that means that it's very hard to get, however, there is a possibility depending on what development they want to do there. Now, obviously, that conflicts with the airport's desire to not have any further development in their area. So we sought to strike a balance between the airport's needs and their growing needs over time, but also the needs of those residents who live there, and in particular one submitter who had bought a property with 2 dwellings on it and wanted to be able to actually realise the potential of that. So those were the issues that were raised in this, and we'll know whether we have achieved that right balance depending on the appeals.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Worship. I happen to have handy a copy of the noise contour maps, and nothing on the eastern side of State Highway 30 is affected by the inner noise contour. The second noise contour does intersect the school property, and so does the outer noise contour, but not the inner.
Right. Councillor Gould and then Councillor Rotorua.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for the report this morning. I just want a little bit of clarification. I'm not trying to lose you, okay? On our page number 29, you state that 17 submissions were received, 3 were accepted late. So there was 17, the 3 late ones were included in the 17, and 4 further submissions were received. And those 4 further submissions, were they way out of time when it was closed off, or was it in response to other questions, like on page 59, where you had a submitter for the Ward Family Trust and you had a further submitter, a different organisation, make a submission?
The terminology with submissions is confusing. So you have a submissions and a submission period, and the people that were late were making a submission, and then there's a second step with plan changes and district plans where you make a further submission. And a further submission is a different thing to a submission. With a further submission, you're commenting on someone's original submission, like the guys you were referring to on page 59. So the 4 further submitters were not out of time, they were just a secondary process.
Yeah. And my second question is to do with page 39, the second line.
Just please don't name submitters.
Sorry?
Don't name submitters.
I'm not naming the submitters, it's wording.
Just protect their
It says the committee are happy to accept. Am I right in saying that the committee accepted? Wouldn't you be better using the word accepted instead of happy to accept?
Well, it's the same thing.
I know, yeah, it's technical.
What's semantics? Kate, is there a difference? Thank you.
I can't see what's written, but I don't think there's any. Sorry.
So this is actually the report of the hearing. So this is the committee actually saying we are accepting. All right.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we will, there appear to be no more questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rotorua.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the very good piece of work before us. Just going forward, I mean, this is the first proposed plan change one. I mean, obviously, since the district plan became operative. So going forward, is there a mechanism that there's constantly going to review, a review being done so that it's always pretty much relevant and pretty much current in terms of anybody want to look at it? Yep, this is the intent, it's still there. So what's going to be happening going forward? Am I asking a dumb question or...?
Not really. This is Plan Change 1 we're doing now. We've already, later in the agenda, we're signing off on Plan Change 6. So the way it goes is that we look at it, and we did this one in October, it goes out. This one took a very long time to come back. Some of them, and I'm going to track the times they take. We've done Plan Change 4, which was on noise, and that has had one appeal. So that's going through another process to get to that. So for the committee, we start one and then that goes off on its journey, and then we start another one and it goes off on its journey, and then we start another one, and then we find the first one, we bring it back, which is why we spend quite a bit of time remembering what it is and where we're up to.
And then we try and remember what we've done.
And remember what we've done.
How many are there, Councillor Hunt? Are there 7 changes?
There are 6 at this point.
6.
There's 14, Plan Change 14 is in the pipeline.
Yes, so we are doing rolling plan changes, and that depends on, we addressed, for example, noise. That specifically came up in relation to a certain issue. And for example, Plan Change 6, the holiday rentals, that came up as a result of a significant issue in the community. So we've done the tidy up from the plan, which is Plan Change 1, and others are coming out as and when required due to either issues that have been initiated or brought up in the community, or because there's a significant reason, other reason to do them. Yep.
Councillor Sturt.
I think this behoves the question. I mean, I'm astounded, Councillor Kent. We're signing off Plan Change 1 and Plan Change 14 is in the process of being done. So, Madam Chair, over time, the experience that these two individuals have gained and the work ethic that they've obviously had to put in to get us to the position on this particular plan change has been intense. So in 5 years' time, neither of them may be here. So where is that intellectual knowledge? Where is, are we relying on officials? Are we relying on staff to keep that intellectual knowledge? Or is further down, I wonder what the CEO's thoughts are on this, is over time it won't be elected representatives who do this type of thing, that maybe it's done on a consultancy type basis or on a commissioner basis. Well, I think that was when we... Yes.
Chair, as the only remaining councillor that went through the district plan, it has been, I believe, beneficial to have remembered, and I haven't remembered all of them, but have remembered why we got to certain points and the discussions about that to give the background. And ideally, the staff will now understand that too, because obviously when we talk to them about the decisions we've made, but you're right, Councillor Sturt, but that's a natural attrition.
And Madam Chair, if I can just make the point, the staff do 90% of the work, plus, right? They come to us and say, this is what we think, and then we critique it and rip it to shreds and mull it all round and put in other options that we think of, we argue, we debate, and then that's when we come to the final decision, and that's when it then goes out for people to submit on, and then we listen to what they have to say, and then based on all that evidence is how we then come up with the final solution that hopefully we get right.
And we bring that to...
Yeah.
And really for us, because it would have once have been, we would have been the sort of so-called experts, which is wrong. So good process that you agreed in the policy. So do I have a mover? Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Put my hand up to move.
Oh, move points 2, 3, 4 and the
five.
addition of 5.
Yep.
Thank
So
you.
moved.
So moved. Seconder? I'm happy to second. Thank you. Oh, saved. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. And thank you to the staff too who have kept this process moving. Right, we move now to recommendation 1, plan change 6, holiday rentals. Request to approve and make operative, page 197. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Approval to make plan change 6 to the district plan holiday rentals operative be received.
I'll move, Your Worship.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Rokawa Tate. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Carried. Thank you. Now, who's speaking to this one? Is you are. Kim. Thank you.
This one really is at the end of the process. It's one step further along than Plan Change 1. So there's already been the appeal period. There were no appeals. So this is really just the last rubber stamp. We're just asking you to make it operative.
So no appeals at all. I thought this was hugely controversial. Good gracious, Councillor Donaldson.
I'm not surprised there are no appeals because we listened, and the proposal from the RMA Policy Committee addressed the concerns of the day. So I think this is a great result that there were no appeals. It shows that the committee came to the right decision, and I fully support the recommendation. It's wonderful.
Golly, nothing's usually that simple. How wonderful. Congratulations. Are there any other questions? All right. You move 2 and 3. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gould. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, carried. Thank you. Now I have a resolution to go into public excluded to adopt the confidential minutes of the previous council meeting, council strategy and governance, risk register and provisional development fund update. They are the items for consideration. You move, Councillor. Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you.